Emily, who always believed that no one would ever love her, experienced really difficult moments in her life. She was really dying after her father's death. Life turned into a real nightmare. The stepmother and her daughters treated her like a servant. They squandered her inheritance and sold the girl to the royal family. However, this family was not so simple. After all, there was a cruel, crazy prince who constantly bullied Emily. He beat her until she lost consciousness. The girl, of course, did not like this life. However, she could not do anything with herself. For every mistake, he called her names and beat her. Even when Emily was simply polite to her servants, he considered it treason, and then she received even more beatings. However, besides the king, who for some reason was kind to her, she also had an ally in that estate. This man was Duke Isaac. However, he was soon accused of murdering the king and was sentenced to death. Now, Emily had no more support. She was completely alone in that cruel world, and the girl was completely desperate. One day, when Emily was returning home from a funeral, she suddenly heard a guy with blonde hair, who was the second son of the king, talking to his dear mother. The woman turned to Philip and said that now he would definitely be able to become king. The man replied in a smug voice that this was exactly what he had been counting on. So he no longer doubted anything. Emily, having overheard this conversation, finally plucked up the courage and went to Philip that night and asked if Duke Isaac had really killed his father. The man, of course, immediately got angry. He didn't understand what she was hinting at and why she decided to talk about all this at all. At that moment, Emily made an incredible mistake because she told Philip all her fears about him. The girl said that Philip himself said that the Duke was standing in his way to the throne and that he had no reason to kill the king. At that time, she did not yet realize what consequences the words she said would have. However, soon her fiancé took a bottle of alcohol and hit her on the head with all his might. The blow was so strong that Emily even fell to the ground. She touched the top of her head, from which blood was flowing. But Philip laughed at that moment. Then he looked like a completely crazy person. However, the man confessed and said that it was really he who killed him. The guy personally confessed that he killed his father and also accused him, saying that he wanted to deprive him of the throne. Of course, in order to avoid taking responsibility, the guy simply blamed Isaac for his brother, and now he should have been in the next world with his father. So, no one else will definitely stop him from achieving what he wants. Emily practically didn't hear his words because the blow was really serious. Everything was blurry before her eyes. She didn't understand what was happening and heard the voice of her fiancé somewhere very far away. In the end, even Philip understood that it would be best for her to simply continue to play her role in silence. However, she herself chose the wrong path for herself. So, in his opinion, it was her fault that she now found herself in this situation. Emily realized that she had indeed made a big mistake. However, she began to wonder if there was any meaning in her life. She was simply abandoned and humiliated, and now she was also killed. Of course, at the moment of her death, she would like to start all over again, and would swear to herself that she would never allow herself to be treated like that again. It was with such thoughts that the girl finally lost consciousness. However, the next moment, she suddenly opens her eyes and sits opposite some brunette. This woman told Emily in a stern voice that they had already found a groom for her. As soon as the girl heard this, she was very shocked, because a minute ago she was dying, and now suddenly she was sitting opposite her mother, whom, of course, she immediately recognized. At that moment, the sister got very angry with her. She poured a glass of water on the girl and told her to immediately answer her mother. She did not understand why the girl had the audacity to say something under her breath. Emilia didn't understand at all why she saw the match and Melanie in front of her. It was her house, but she didn't know what was happening. Her mother repeated the phrase again and said that they had found her a groom. Then she announced that the girl was supposed to marry Prince Philip. She believed that for a ragamuffin like Emily, this was a real gift of fate, so she should be incredibly grateful to them for such an opportunity. But since the girl knew how it all was going to end, she screamed loudly and said that she couldn't marry him. They were married for a whole year, and after that, he went and killed her. The girl still didn't fully understand what was happening, but she knew that this wedding definitely couldn't be allowed. But her sister laughed loudly and said that they really would be an ideal couple. No one wanted to marry Philip because he was cruel and selfish, but for Emily, he would be perfect. Her stepmother made it clear to the girl that she had no choice but to refuse, and the engagement was to be announced in a month, so she was simply informed of the situation. Emily at some point thought that she had a terrible dream. After all, she had already heard this conversation. Of course, she did not want to relive this nightmare again, so she wanted to wake up as soon as possible. She believed that since it was just a dream, she could not sit there and wait for something, but but simply run away. Now the control was in her hands. Emily suddenly got up from the table and started to run away. Of course, her sister and stepmother were shocked when they saw this. The woman immediately sent guards after her so that they would catch her. But the girl continued to run. She knew that she didn't want to live like this. She didn't care at all. She thought that it was just a dream, so she could act as she wanted. Several hours passed from that moment, and eventually she ran into the deep forest, and it was already dark outside, and it started to rain heavily. But Emily was still running. When she finally found herself very far from the estate, she was glad. However, she also understood that, at this rate, she would die before Philip got to her because of the terrible weather and the lack of a place to live. When she had rested and gained some strength, she went on and saw an estate not far from her, which was located in the very wilderness. Emily took the liberty and went inside. It was cold there. At least, it was dry. As soon as the girl was inside, she immediately tried to call someone, but she did not hear a single word in response. When she repeated her request for someone to answer her, she suddenly heard a hoarse voice coming from under the stairs. This voice told her to get out of the estate immediately. Of course, Emily, hearing this, was very scared. She screamed loudly. However, because the person who said this phrase did not expect such a thing, he himself was scared. Emily then saw that a small man had fallen from under the stairs. When she looked more closely, she realized that it was just a small child with a sheet over his head. In fact, this child was a silver-haired boy, and because he did not expect to hear Emily's scream, he even burst into tears because he himself was scared. In fact, this boy's name was Louis, and he was downstairs at such a time for a reason. Together with his little sister, he was left alone in the mansion that evening. Their uncle had gone away on business, so the children went to bed early because the thunderstorm still scared them. However, soon the little sister told her brother that she could not sleep. Louis, who also was not going to sleep, smiled and replied that he also could not fall asleep. Then the girl suggested that he just take it and play. The boy was immediately happy. He thought that they could play hide and seek. It would be very interesting in an empty estate. His sister, of course, agreed, but said that they had to act quietly, because if they were noticed, they would be scolded. Louis was, of course, happy and said that he would behave quietly. At first, the boy wanted to hide, but his sister refused him this, so he had to look for her. The girl even ran out into the backyard to see where she could hide. However, she saw that someone was coming inside. She was, of course, very scared, so she quickly returned back to the estate. Louis immediately saw her and told Stella that she had lost. But the girl was very excited. She said that their uncle had already returned, so they needed to immediately return to the room before he noticed them. But after that, the door to their mansion opened and Emery walked in, and the children became very wary when they heard her voice. They had absolutely no idea who this girl was. Louis was ready to burst into tears because he was much smaller than Stella and assumed that this girl could even be a villain. But his sister offered him a plan of action on how they could drive away this stranger. They simply put it on their heads and thus frightened Emily. But because Louis heard a loud scream from a woman, he tripped and fell. And when Emily saw that they were just children, she immediately became worried. The sister took off her covers. She ran up to her little brother and tried to calm him down, telling him not to cry, that everything was fine with him, that he had nothing to be afraid of. Emily realized that they were twins. For some time, she did not touch them, but then she came closer and was about to say something, but she did not have time. In such situations, Stella behaved completely like an adult. She screamed loudly at the stranger and asked who she was. Emily understood that if she started to be cheeky, she would frighten them even more. After bowing, she asked for forgiveness for the intrusion and introduced herself. The girl explained that she got lost in the forest and accidentally saw this estate, so she decided to go inside and warm up a little. Stella understood that this woman could really be dangerous for them, so she yelled at her and told her to leave immediately. Emily asked her for forgiveness again and said that she would really like to spend the night in this place, but in the morning she would immediately leave and not bother her anymore. The girl immediately said that of course she couldn't allow this. They were forbidden to let in any strangers. Louis decided to scare this woman and said that if she did not leave, she would be cursed. The children began to argue, and Emily, seeing this, immediately giggled. It was very cute, in her opinion. Stella didn't think so. It only made her even angrier. She threw the blanket towards the woman and told her to leave, otherwise it would only get worse for her. The girl even said something about Emily's curse. Of course, she took it seriously. She asked what curse she was talking about. Of course, she couldn't react in time and didn't come up with any curse, but Emily understood everything anyway. She saw how much the girl was reflecting from fear. Such a reaction was, of course, quite obvious. Late at night, a stranger came into their house. Of course, they were scared. The girl and she decided to just leave in order not to cause them even more discomfort. She again asked them for forgiveness for waking them up, and the girl burst in and said that she would leave now and would not bother them anymore. And when Emily was about to go out the door, the front door suddenly opened again, and a black-haired man appeared there. He turned to the stranger in a rough voice and asked what she was doing there anyway. The girl realized that it was most likely the owner. She turned to him and asked for forgiveness. She said that she was very sorry and explained that she was simply lost. Well, looking at this man, Emily immediately understood who this man was, Duke Isaac, who was executed in her past life. The man went inside, and next to him was an assistant who held his stomach wound in order to stop the bleeding. The man immediately said that the gentleman had to lie down immediately. Emily realized that he was wounded and wanted to help him. She ran up, but the tongue looked at her with a very stern look despite the pain, and told her not to dare even approach him. He told her to leave immediately if she didn't want to pay for what she did. His assistant asked Emily for forgiveness. He said that they were busy at the moment, so in a polite voice, he said that it would be best for her to just leave the estate. Of course, the girl couldn't just pass by the wounded man and not help him. She asked the man for forgiveness and said that she was very sorry for her rudeness, but she had to do it. Then, Emily directed her magical energy towards the man's stomach where she had been before, and after some time there was no trace left of the pain and scratch. As soon as the man saw this, he was very amazed. He asked the girl how she did it. However, Emily only smiled happily and said that he hoped that she felt better after that. She said that she could now leave calmly. The girl was glad to help Isaac. However, at that moment, she suddenly felt how dizzy she was, and eventually, she simply fainted. For some time, she thought that she could have dreamed all of this, so it didn't matter what she was doing. However, when her eyes closed and she saw Isaac, she began to think that perhaps this was reality after all. Quite a lot of time had passed since that moment when the girl regained consciousness and felt how warm she was. After she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was the fireplace, which was right in front of her. After that, she sat down and saw Isaac, who was sitting next to her. The man, seeing that she had finally woken up, asked how she was feeling. But Emily, of course, did not expect to see the Duke next to her. She immediately jumped to her feet, but the man warned her to lie back down, otherwise she would lose consciousness again. She felt dizzy again, so she fell onto the bed. Then Amelia finally realized that all this was not a dream. It was her reality. In fact, she had never been a guest of the Duke, and therefore she certainly could not imagine such an interior. And only one thing could realize this. She magically returned to the past. When the girl was a little healed, he turned to her and asked if she really knew how to heal people. The girl replied that everything was exactly like that. However, her abilities are very weak, so she is not such a genius. But the man thought differently, because she still saved him, after which he gave her an extra blanket and poured her a cup of hot tea. For a while, they just enjoyed their drink in silence. Emily thought about how this man was nicknamed the Duke Executioner, but in the end, he turned out to be very nice and friendly. In fact, Isaac Geisel was rumored to have had family members who were assassins in the service of the crown. That is why his entire family was called the Executioners. Then, she assumed that it was because of this that he had a wound. The rumors about the murders were probably true. However, because the man took care of her and made sure she was warm after the cold rain, Emily realized that he wasn't so horrible. The girl realized the fact that she was definitely alive. She returned to the past before her wedding with Philip. And because of this, of course, she was happy. Isaac finally decided to talk to her. He said that he wanted to know her name and how she ended up in the middle of the forest, in the middle of the night, during a terrible thunderstorm. The girl apologized for being rude and not introducing herself right away. She said her name and then thought about how to tell him how she ended up in this place. Amelia knew that if she said something wrong, she would easily be thrown out into the street, and she didn't want that. So she said, "I ran away from home and I have nowhere to go. I am ready for any job." So the girl asked him to let her stay at least as a worker on his estate. The girl knew how to heal wounds, so she convinced him that she would definitely still be useful to the man. Isaac agreed that she had helped him out that day. However, he was not going to give shelter to a stranger. Emily said that it would certainly be very difficult to explain this whole situation to his wife. However, as it turned out, the man was not married. Because of this, she was even more surprised. After all, she did not understand whose children she met were. The man explained that these were the children of his older brother, and that he had taken them in after the death of his brother and wife. Then the girl realized that they had died, and realized that if she had really returned to the past, then in a year, Duke Isaac would have been executed for the murder of the king. Of course, she immediately became interested in what happened to the children in that life after the man's death, because she never even knew that they existed at all. The girls knew the truth. The man did not kill the king. He was simply set up. So if Emily does nothing, then she will have an innocent death on her conscience. She was going to return home and become Philip's wife, because she was a noblewoman and the daughter of the Marquis of Cloy. They were a respected family with a long history, stepmother, and Melania, spent all of their father's money, and they were on the verge of ruin. However, the status of a marquise still carries weight in society, so Emily decided to seize this important component, namely influence. She knew that Duke Isaac was fighting with Philip for the right to the throne, so they could join forces, and then the man would have more influence. Besides this, she knew that a tragic ending awaited the two of them, which could have been prevented. So the girl was serious. There was only one way to prove to society that she and the Duke were in the same boat, and that was marriage. Emily came closer to the Duke and asked in a confident voice if he would like to marry her. Even the man was very surprised. He asked what she was saying and began to doubt whether she was in her right mind. She asked if it was true that he didn't want Prince Philip to become king. Of course, Isaac began to doubt how she could know that. The girl couldn't tell him the truth, so she decided that she had to get out of it by bowing. She said that she found out. It was from the family of the Marquis of Chloe. She said that on that day, she found out that she had to marry Philip. Of course, she was against this idea, and that is why she found herself in the middle of the forest in such weather. Emily apologized for not telling him right away, but the man didn't understand what their marriage had to do with this situation. But Emily explained that if she marries Philip, he will definitely become king. And if she marries Isaac, then in this way, he will be able to buy time. The man did not understand why she acted so radically, because there were many other ways to prevent this, but the girl said that he simply needed it. She warned him that this marriage would be fictitious. If they united, then there would be no engagement with Philip, and thus they would radically change the future of the country. But Isaac didn't care at all about her arguments. He wasn't going to marry anyone. Seeing her surprised expression, he asked if she hadn't heard what they were saying about his family. They are called executioners and have the same disgusting reputation as Philip, so he can never know when he will die. However, he feels that it could happen at any moment. In fact, there were several reasons for the bad rumors about Duques's family, and one of them was that the heads of the Isaac family always died young. The reason was shrouded in mystery, but the girl knew what had happened to them. It was all about their work. And that is why Emily continued to convince him that he needed her, because she could definitely be useful to him as a healer. Isaac continued to doubt. He said that he couldn't just let a stranger into the house because his brother's children were still living with him, and he had to take care of the name. Of course, the girls felt bad, but she decided to press on his sore spot, and told him to think about what would happen to the children if, God forbid, some kind of trouble happened to him. Of course, Emily didn't want the man to suffer because she, like no one else, knew what it was like to lose loved ones. After her father died, she was left completely alone and would not wish such a thing on her enemy. Isaac thought about her words for a while, but eventually he agreed. However, he had a condition. The man said that he could give her a month, and during this time she should take care of Louis and Stella. He said that they should become friends, and if the girl copes, then of course they will get married and there will be no problems with that. The girl was absolutely confident in her abilities, so she said that he could already prepare the wedding vows, because she, like no one else, knows how to run a household, so everything will be under control. Isaac was a little wary of this woman. She was throwing loud words about the future of the country. It seemed to him that she simply did not want to marry Philip, so he was sure that in a few days she would simply give up. He deliberately gave her such a difficult task because Geminis were very bad at getting along with strangers, so it would not be easy for her to make friends. At this moment, Stella and her brother found themselves in the bedroom. The boy had seen his beautiful dreams long ago, but the girl could not fall asleep. She kept thinking that it was the stranger who had healed her uncle's wound. However, the woman was still quite suspicious. Stella thought that she could be a witch, but in the end she decided that in the morning, her uncle would hint that they needed to remove this woman before she harmed them. At that moment, Louis suddenly woke up, with tears in his eyes. He immediately hugged his sister and said in a trembling voice that he was very scared. The girl tried to calm him down. She said that everything was fine. She stood next to him, took his hand, and said that they would hold on like that all night so that he would feel that she was there and not afraid. Louis did not object. The girl hugged him at that moment, but tears returned to her eyes. She hated this world with all her soul. Thus, the daughter flew by completely unnoticed. Emily woke up as early as possible. Of course, yesterday she was very tired, so she fell asleep very quickly. Isaacs took her to the room where she was now supposed to live and warned her that in a month he would see how she got along with the children and then make his final verdict. Of course, it was very brave of the girl to propose marriage, but she simply had no choice. She was going to do everything in her power, even if she seemed crazy. After she woke up, a maid suddenly knocked on her door. When she went inside, she bowed and said that breakfast was ready, so she was going to accompany her there. Emily thanked her and immediately went downstairs because she was really hungry. When the girl found herself downstairs and saw all these luxurious dishes that were on the table, she was pleasantly surprised. No one had spoken to her politely since her father died. So things like this were incredibly important to her. Immediately after the maid left, Duke Isaac came in. He wished her good morning. Emilia immediately approached him and asked how he was feeling and if everything was okay with his injury. The man thanked her for her concern and said that everything was fine with him, after which the twins themselves entered the room. As soon as Stella saw this woman, she became very angry. She asked her uncle why she was still there. Well, Isaac told the girl not to be rude after that. He introduced the children to Emily and said their names. Emily noticed that the children had rather dark circles under their eyes. This was first because they were not getting enough sleep. She immediately decided that the first thing she would do would be to improve their sleep. The children were still afraid of her, but she did not put too much pressure on them because she understood how much change had happened in their lives. After everyone sat down at the dinner table, Emily tried her share of breakfast and said that it was the most delicious breakfast in her life. Isaac said that he was glad that she liked everything. After that, he saw that the children did not even touch the food and was very surprised because of this. Louis shook himself hard and said that he didn't like tomatoes, and Stella even started screaming loudly. She said that she didn't want to eat with this stranger who could be a murderer. Well, Isaac explained that she was not an acquaintance at all. He gave her full name and said that now she would live with them, so they had to behave politely. Stella, hearing that this woman would not leave now, was very shocked. She asked how her uncle could leave her like this. She just came out of nowhere. The boy himself was very scared. He hid behind his sister all the time and didn't say anything. Emily introduced herself and asked what she could call them. Stella continued to show her displeasure. She said that they would not be friends, so she should not have approached them at all. After this, the girl got up from her seat and left. Isaac tried to stop her, but she did not listen. The brother was about to go after her. However, the man told him in a stern voice to sit down and at least have breakfast. Louis objected and said that he didn't want Emily asked if he wasn't hungry at all. Then, she went to the plate and said that if he didn't like the tomatoes, then it was easy to fix. The boy said that they were very sour, and that was why he didn't even want to try them. Emily was glad that at least she was able to establish contact with him a little. She took his plate of food in her hands and said that now she would cast a spell on the food so that it would all be very tasty and Louis would like it. Because he was so small, of course he believed it. But in fact, the women simply sprinkled sugar on tomatoes, and after trying one of them, she said that now they were not sour at all. She handed him her second tomato and asked if he would like to try it and make sure that they really were now completely different in taste. Louis hesitated for a while, but he still tried the tomato and he really liked it. It really did taste very good. He said that it tasted like it even reminded him of the fruit. Emily smiled and said that she was very glad that he liked it. Then the boy felt embarrassed that he was being so naughty and therefore allowed her to call him by his name. The girl was happy that she managed to quickly establish contact with at least one child. Isaac, however, was surprised. He watched what was happening. However, he understood that with Stella, everything would not go so easily. After they finished their meal, Louis went to his sister and said that Emily was very good. She was able to turn tomatoes into a tasty product. His sister yelled at him and said that he couldn't talk to her and that she had forbidden him to be friends with this woman. Because the boy was very trusting, he lowered his head and agreed and said that this would not happen again, despite the fact that he really liked Emily. Stella, however, was determined to protect Louis with all her heart. She believed that this evil witch needed to be thrown out of the estate. The girl was so angry at this world because their children, executioners, were always despised by everyone around them. When they were going to play with their peers, the children always ran away from them, shouted, called them names, and were even ready to hit them. Even the adults were very rude to the children. When Louis was about to run up to one boy and play with him, his mother pushed Louis so hard that he even fell to the ground. The boy then immediately burst into tears. He turned to Stella and asked why everyone hated them. He was still too little to understand anything. However, at that moment, she finally understood that she would make every effort to protect him so that she would no longer see those terrible tears on his beautiful, sweet face. The girl believed that if her mom and dad were alive, they would be a happy family. And every time she wondered why, they were not like everyone else. Why didn't they have parents? After she finished playing with Louis and he went about his business, she returned to the room. All this time, she thought about these situations and cried. Then the girl heard someone knocking on the door of the room, and Emily's voice was heard from there, asking if she could come in. Stella quickly wiped away her tears and said that of course she couldn't, but the woman didn't listen to her. Entering the room, she brought a small bun and said that because she had not had a normal breakfast, she brought her a snack. Stella objected and said that she would not eat it, but Emily insisted and replied that if she did not eat it, she would get sick, so that was not possible. Then the girl decided to turn this situation to her advantage. She said that she actually wanted to eat something. Emily was glad that she was able to contact her and asked what exactly she wanted. The little girl pointed towards the window and the forest that was visible from it and said that there were wild berries there. They grew deep in the forest, and that was what she wanted. She wanted red, sweet strawberries. Emily smiled and said that she would go and pick them without any problem, girls. She just had to wait a little. In order to fulfill her duty, she actually went into the forest after the woman left. Louis, who heard this conversation, told his sister that this should not have been done. Everyone was forbidden to go into that creepy forest. But Stella had her own plan, and she said that this way the witch would definitely not return. So they were in a winning position. After Emily went into the forest and finally found the berries she needed, she was about to go home when she suddenly heard strange sounds behind her. These sounds were made by wolves, who had approached her and were about to attack. They bared their terrible teeth and began to growl loudly. The girl was very scared. She screamed and could not stay on her feet. She fell to the ground. The wolves regarded this as resistance, so they pounced on her even faster. When Emily was already preparing for her next death, fortunately, this did not happen, which appeared at the right moment and scared these animals away, and they ran away in fear back into the forest. The girl was immediately happy to see him. However, the man was not so happy. He asked in a stern voice what she was doing in the middle of the forest at such a time. Emily explained that she just decided to take a walk. However, the man looked at her carefully and saw a basket of berries nearby that she was picking. This explained a lot to him. So, closer to the evening, they returned back to the estate, and the first thing Isaac asked Stella was whether it was really she who sent Emily into the forest for these berries. The girl tried to protect the child. However, it didn't work. The man said that if she hadn't been asked to pick berries, she wouldn't have gone into the forest. Therefore, she didn't need to protect Stella. They argued for some time, but then, suddenly, the girl herself entered the conversation. She told her uncle that he had brought a witch into their house, and that she was trying to drive away this evil creature. When the adults heard this, they were of course very surprised, but the language did not expect that she would say something like that, so for some time, he even doubted that he could answer. Emily turned out to be more observant. She noticed that Stella even burst into tears. The girl turned to the man and asked if he could leave her alone with the girl. The girl was initially against it, but in the end, she simply had no choice. They went to the gazebo, and the first thing Stella did was ask what the woman wanted to talk about. Emily immediately explained that she had no intention of scolding her. She had gone into the forest herself without warning the Duke. She also explained that she understood perfectly well that the girl was trying to protect her brother at night when she sneaked into the estate, but Stella had already not let her get close to them. The girl was silent for a while, and then in a stern voice she asked why the woman didn't want to leave. Emily didn't know if she should tell him that she had run away from home, because it would be wrong to bring it up without discussing it with the Duke. So she simply said that she had nowhere else to go and needed the Duke's help. At that moment, she began to assume that perhaps her uncle might like her, and she wondered if that was really true. When she saw the horrified look on Emily's face, she assumed it was true and said that she had terrible taste in men. She still wanted to say something, but didn't have time because suddenly a beautiful white puppy jumped onto their small table. Stella immediately looked sternly at her brother and asked Louis what he was doing anyway. The boy apologized and explained that he decided to hide nearby as soon as he saw that they were suddenly talking. He saw a puppy, but it suddenly ran straight towards them. Of course, Louis ran after him, but he tripped and fell, and the puppy jumped onto their table. Louis assumed that this puppy was homeless and asked his sister what he could do in that case. But Emily replied that from his clean fur and well-groomed appearance, one could conclude that he had simply run away from someone. Of course, the brother wanted to keep him. However, Stella made it clear to him that his uncle would not allow them. So the boy, after saying goodbye to the puppy, replied that he could not keep him. They left him aside and told him to run away. However, the puppy followed Louis and started whining. Of course, the boy was confused. He asked what he should do in such a situation. They couldn't just abandon the poor animal on the street. Emily left the children to play with the puppy so that he would not get bored, while she went to the estate to talk to the Duke. Of course, she thought that she would just waste her time and her uncle would not allow her to do anything, but they did not stop her. When Emily went to Isaac, the first thing she explained was why she sent her to pick berries. Of course, it was all for her brother. She said that she had protected him from strangers with all her might, and the tongue was surprised that the woman found out about this and asked, did the girl really confess herself? Of course, this was not the case. The woman explained the situation when she sneaked into the estate at night. She said that Stella is a very caring girl who loves her brother incredibly. After that, she changed the subject and said that she would like to ask him to allow her to keep the puppy that had gotten into the garden. Emilia said that Louis got along very well with him. They assumed that the puppy had run away, and she asked if he would mind if this animal lived with them until the owner was found. Isaac agreed to this, but warned that they would definitely not leave him forever. Of course, the girl was incredibly happy. She also said that the next day, she would go to look for the owners in the city. And then suddenly the assistant unexpectedly intervened in the conversation, and his name was Theo. He said that it was time for Mr. Louis and Stella to buy new clothes, and Emily could also pick out something new so the Duke could accompany her. The girl immediately objected. However, the man, despite the fact that he was not delighted with this idea, nevertheless agreed and said that tomorrow they would all go to the city together. That's exactly what happened. They woke up quite early, and the first thing after breakfast, they went straight to the city center. When Emilia saw such a large number of people outside, she did not regret at all that she took a hat for herself, because she needed to hide her face. She certainly didn't want to run into her stepmother and Melanie, so she tried to stay out of anyone's sight. The first thing they did was go to a cutie boutique. It was a clothing store. The children immediately tried on new outfits in which they looked incredibly cute. When the girl saw them in these new outfits, she was delighted. They really looked very good. After that, she would like to look at a few more other options. And after the children were given the right clothes, Emily also tried on several options and chose the one that was most suitable for herself. At that very moment, Mrs. Melanie was indeed in town, shopping for new clothes. The girl was very angry because she bought such expensive shoes, and in the end, she couldn't even walk normally. She was going to complain to the owner of the shop because of such inconveniences. But a man was passing by her. He suddenly snatched the girl's handbag and started to run away. Of course, she didn't start screaming at the top of her lungs so that they could catch the thief. Isaac, who was walking ahead, easily stopped the man and gave the handbag to the girl. She immediately thanked him for his help. After the man went on to deal with the police, the girl fell in love with him. He really looked very handsome and attractive. Then, Melanie thought that the moment of her meeting with the handsome prince had finally come. So after they had sorted things out, she approached him again. The girl thanked him and introduced herself. Of course, as soon as Isaac heard that she was from the same Marquis's house as Emily, he was very surprised. The girl invited him to her home and said that she wanted to thank him so much. But the man replied that he did not need gratitude and that he still had urgent matters to attend to. Melanie immediately ran after him. She understood that if she let him go, they would never meet again, and she didn't want that. Somehow, the man had gone too far, and Soap couldn't even see him anymore, and all because of those horrible shoes that squeezed her feet. Then she walked a few more blocks, and then suddenly saw Isaac opposite her carriage, and she was immediately glad that she had finally found him. And when the girl was about to come up and say hello to him, she heard a familiar voice. It belonged directly to Emily. The girl and her children apologized for making him wait, and explained that she had spoken to the seller and that he now had to help them find the dog's owners. She also said that thanks to Stella's drawings, they were able to put up an ad and really hoped that the owner would be found soon. Isaac extended his hand to the girl and said that it was time for them to return. Melanie, of course, seeing this, was beside herself with rage. The girl didn't understand where Emily came from and how this could happen. After their carriage left, her assistant approached the girl and asked if everything was okay with her, since she had disappeared so unexpectedly. Melanie replied that nothing good could happen to her. She was very angry, and the man asked why she suddenly decided to talk to the Duke executioner. The woman, hearing about this, immediately understood that this was the same Duke about whom there were terrible rumors. She explained that she did not recognize him and was not at all afraid. He had not done anything bad to her. The girl herself thought about how Emily could know her handsome prince, and she was not going to allow them to be together at all, so she definitely wanted to interfere with their happy pastime. On the way home, Isaac turned to Emily and began to say that he ran into the girl and her family and asked if she was too against it. Hearing this, she was very surprised and realized that Melanie was nearby at that moment, and this was very bad. She really regretted that she had gone to the city at all. After all, if they found her, they would catch her and give her to Philip, and she didn't want that. The girl even began to shake a little with fear, because she knew that Philip would kill her in that case. When Melanie returned to the estate late in the evening, the first thing she did was go to her mother. She told Patricia about what she saw Emily. The woman was very surprised when she heard about it, and immediately began asking her about how this could have happened. The daughter explained that she was walking around the city with the Duke executioner, and she accidentally saw them together. Patricia understood that she needed to get her home as soon as possible, because she didn't want the palace to inundate them with letters. She believed that Amelia didn't even have to try to hide from them. She wouldn't succeed. They were going to find her anyway and do what was necessary. The next day, Stella was in the yard. She was drawing butterflies that surrounded her. The girl was very carried away by the process. Emilia, seeing her drawing, said that she was incredibly beautiful and knew how to do all this, but the girl got angry and replied that she did not allow anyone to look. The girl asked her for forgiveness and said that she just did it so well that she got carried away and did not notice how she violated her boundaries. Stella thought that she didn't have to try to be nice to her. The girl explained that she knew that she and her uncle were hiding something from the children. It was very obvious. Seeing Emily's surprised expression, the girl said that she probably knew what their uncle did at night. At the moment, she thought that Stella meant marriage with the Duke. She was not sure that the man received his wound during work, so she replied that I did not say anything about it. Stella found it very suspicious that, given their close relationship, they didn't even talk about it. In the end, she simply turned away from the girl and told her not to pay attention. She was happy that no one knew anything about it, so she also persuaded her younger brother at night. She decided to follow her uncle and find out for herself where he was going. Isaac and his assistant left the estate, and Stella was going to follow him. Louis was, of course, against this idea. At first, he tried to dissuade his sister. However, when she finally went to get her uncle, he grabbed her hand and, with tears in his eyes, asked her not to do it. He said that his uncle would be very angry if he saw them. That's why he was against it. In the end, while the children were arguing, Isaac and his assistant had already left. Stella was very upset. She immediately yelled at her brother and said that it was because of him that she did not see anything. After that, she replied that she did not want to see him anymore and asked him not to touch her. At that very moment, Emily, who was sleeping peacefully in her room, suddenly woke up unexpectedly and heard some strange sounds coming from the corridors. The girl assumed that someone was crying when she went out into the corridor to check and saw Louis returning from their failed mission. He was really crying, very loudly. She immediately ran up to him and tried to calm him down. The woman asked what had happened and what could have upset him so much. She invited him into her room so that he would feel safe and then told him. But the boy, continuing to cry, replied that he wanted to go to Stella. Emily escorted him to the girl's room, and when she said that she was coming in, she suddenly screamed at her and told them to leave her alone and go away. Emily had never seen her in such a state before. She assumed that the children had quarreled, so she tried to come up with a plan of action to get them talking and reconcile. Louis tried to talk to his sister, but the cat just yelled at him again and started calling him a whiner. She said she hated whiners. They really irritated her. Hearing this, he became even more upset. The boy began to cry again, and Emily did not understand at all what was happening and how to act. She realized that her intervention would only make the situation worse, but Louis needed to be calmed down, which is why she saw a book of fairy tales lying on the table. The girl took the book in her hands and began to read these stories. Louis immediately became interested. Having heard this magical story, he said that the characters in the book began to live early, just like his uncle. The boy finally stopped crying. Emily closed the book and patted him on the head and said that he was a good boy since he was able to calm down. At that moment, she heard his stomach growling, so Emily decided to save the situation. She brought him a big plate of pancakes and strawberry jam. The boy certainly liked it. He thanked her and said that they were incredibly tasty. Emily, meanwhile, seeing how interested Stella was, quietly told Louis that Stella loved strawberries. So the boy realized that he had to share with his sister in order to make peace at the same time. He gave her a piece of pancake on a fork and asked if she would like to eat too, since he certainly wouldn't be able to handle it all. Stella did not refuse. While they ate, they talked, and eventually made peace. The boy asked her for forgiveness, and it was as if their resentment had never existed. Emily just watched this with a smile on her face. She knew that these children would always be together, and no matter what happened, they would definitely make up. Isaac, at that moment, was somewhere in a remote corner of the city. He had completed his mission, and his whole face was now splattered with someone else's blood. I'm returning home. His assistant said that the task was completed. He said that this time, there were a little more of them, and asked if the man was tired. The Duke had long since gotten used to it. Therefore, he didn't care. His assistant also noticed that the twins were following them closely. The man himself noticed this. He was surprised that they really thought that he wouldn't notice them. Isaac warned his assistant that while there was a stranger living in the house, he definitely needed to be more careful. Amelia left the children in her room when they finished the sweet dessert. She took the plate and washed it. The girl was very happy that they finally made up. Before going to bed, she also decided to look in on them to check if everything was okay. As soon as she approached the door, she heard Louis crying loudly and calling for help. She immediately ran into the room. She was afraid that something was wrong. However, as soon as she entered there, she saw that Stella was trying to calm him down. She acted absolutely measuredly, as if this always happens. When Emily asked what had happened and if everything was okay with the boy, Stella only asked in a cold voice that she just leave and not call anyone. Of course, the girl was very surprised, but listened to her while she was going back up to her room. She thought about the fact that Lois was feeling very bad. However, Stella had already gotten used to sitting with him like this. When she went upstairs, she saw Duke Isaac. She greeted him and realized that since he had returned under her at night, he was doing dark things in which it was best not to interfere. When the man was surprised that she was not sleeping, the girl explained that Louis had a nightmare, so she woke up. After that, she asked if the boy was really sick with something. It's hard to get up, and the Duke explained that, in fact, the boy slept so badly every night, therefore she just needed to get used to it and not pay attention. The girl, hearing about this, was amazed. She did not expect that this really happened every night, but now at least it became clear to her why the twins were always sleepy. Isaac just said that it was none of her business and asked her not to get involved in this situation. When Emily tried to stop him and touched his hand, he pushed her aside. The girl began to fall. However, the Duke noticed this in time. He grabbed her by the waist and prevented her from rolling straight down the stairs. The man asked her for forgiveness. He said that he had gone a little too far due to strong emotions, and also asked if everything was okay with her. At that moment, they were very close to each other. Emily was a little worried. However, she was still worried about the issue with the twins. So she asked the man if he really couldn't do anything about Louis, because she couldn't watch him suffer and not do anything. Isaac finally let her go. He said that he was very grateful to her for her worries. However, he explained that she couldn't help in any way. Therefore, she just needed to calm down. He said that many family members suffer from this disease, then turned around and simply left without saying a single word to her. All night, Emily thought about what they were hiding and whether she really couldn't help with it. Eventually, morning came, and she was very sleep-deprived. While the girl was sitting and trying to get some sleep, she heard a knock on her door early in the morning. Emily opened it and saw that it was Louis. She wished him good morning and asked if everything was okay with him, because he looked very worried. Then the boy looked at her and burst into tears and said that their puppy was missing. Of course, the girl was worried. She, together with Stella and Louis, began to walk around the entire estate and tried to find this puppy. At that moment, the sister found out that Louis had already even given the dog a name. His name was Fluffy. She decided that he had done it in vain. After all, it would be much more painful to say goodbye. After searching the house all morning, they came to the conclusion that he was not there. Louis suggested that perhaps he somehow got out into the street and was whining from loneliness there. The girl tried to calm him down. She said that he was definitely okay. Maybe he just ran away to his owner. But the boy continued to insist on his own. He said that if they didn't find him, everything would be very bad. He would disappear forever. After that, he started crying again. Louis was very sensitive. Emily, of course, felt sorry for the boy. She said that they would definitely find him. She was going to look around the estate and also ask the maids for help. Emily spent the whole day until the very night looking for the puppy on the street. She went around all possible places and noticed that it was already dark. Then, the girl came to the conclusion that at this rate, they definitely would not be able to find him. She returned to the estate. The girl was all in dirt. She thought that tomorrow it would be possible to continue the search. After all, it was a small puppy, so he definitely couldn't run far. When Louis saw that the girl had returned, he immediately looked at her with hope and asked if she had found his puppy. But Emily said that she had not succeeded in doing so, and the maids had not been able to find anything. The boy was very upset. He lowered his head and asked Emily if they would never see him again. The girl didn't even know what to answer him. Then she suddenly noticed that the teddy bear that the boy was hugging was all torn. Louis explained that the fluffy one was playing with him. Louis explained that it was his favorite toy. He was very angry with him because of this, and now he felt doubly guilty because the last thing the fluffy one remembered was a quarrel. Then the girl had one thought. Where could the dog be? She went back up to the bedroom and looked under the bed and finally found him. The children, seeing him, immediately rejoiced. First hugged the evil dog and then burst into tears again, but this time from happiness. Emily explained to the children that dogs often hide when they are scolded. The boy asked the fluffy one for forgiveness, and the woman then decided to take the teddy bear from him in order to sew it up. After she had done everything, she gave it to the boy and said that now it was as good as new. Louis was very impressed. past and did not think that a woman could fix it. Emily was happy that she was able to get at least some benefit from her previous life. In her home, she was always treated as a servant. Her housework helped her out a lot in this situation, so she was happy. Emilia noticed that the boy loved this teddy bear very much, and Louis said that his mother gave it to him and that she cast a spell on it so that he wouldn't have nightmares. As soon as the girl heard about this, she was very shocked. She realized that this was probably the reason he had trouble sleeping. When she wanted to ask him what he was dreaming about, the boy did not answer. He ran away from her and said that he wouldn't say anything. Of course, she was a little upset. However, she didn't put pressure on him. Emilia realized the fact that he really suffered from nightmares. And then suddenly, an idea came to her mind, how she could help him. The boy didn't object, so he brought Emily to their bedroom. Of course, Stella wasn't at all thrilled about this, and asked why the guy even let her in. Of course, she immediately apologized for entering without permission, but she said that she knew how she could help Louis. Since Emily knew how to heal people, she believed that she could cure them of their nightmares. The girl suggested that they could try holding hands all night, and then it might help. Stella heard that she knew about the nightmares, and became even more angry. Louis eventually admitted that he told her, and the girl became even more angry because he didn't even tell her. The boy was worried, but in the end he said that he didn't want to see any more scary dreams. He stretched his hands forward towards Emily and said that he didn't mind holding hands. The main thing was that he could sleep normally. Stella also had no choice. She finally agreed to it when the children went to bed. Emily took the boy by the hand and told him to make Louis's nightmare disappear. She began to use her magical abilities. The boy immediately felt how the warmth began to spread throughout his body, which made him feel very happy. Emily asked him to close his eyes and go to bed. She would be there and would definitely control everything if anything happened. Stella was skeptical about all this, and when the girl offered to hold Elsa's hand, she turned around and said that she didn't trust witches. So she refused. After Emily looked at Louis, she noticed that he had already fallen asleep, which made her very surprised. But the boy looked very cute, and she really wanted to hug him. She really hoped that he would sleep peacefully and without nightmares. But in the end, some time had passed since then, and Stella had also fallen asleep. However, only a few minutes passed when suddenly the girl woke up screaming and asked for help. Emily looked at her in surprise and asked if she had a nightmare. She immediately extended her hand and said that Louis was fast asleep, so she advised her to take her hand too. But Stella refused this. She told the girl not to pay attention and to only watch her brother. After that, she went back to bed. Emily did not insist on her own. She only thought that she would have to make friends with this girl. She really wanted Stella to sleep as soundly as she did and was ready to make every effort to achieve this. Thus, the whole night passed. Early in the morning, Louis woke up first. He was very surprised that as soon as he opened his eyes, the bright sun was already shining. The boy immediately screamed loudly and said that he had slept well and had not had any nightmares all night. Emily, who had fallen asleep for a short time, woke up. After him, she smiled and asked how he was feeling and how his sleep had gone in general. The boy said that he slept soundly, then turned to his sister and boasted that he had not had nightmares. Stella, on the contrary, did not get enough sleep, and because of this, she again had dark circles under her eyes. He suggested that the next night she try holding Emily's hand too. Maybe that would help her too. The girl, of course, was not going to give up her principles. She screamed loudly and said that she would never do this for anything in the world. At that very moment, Ike was at the door. He heard this conversation and was a little surprised. In fact, the assistant had said in advance that the girl had slept in the twins' bedroom. Therefore, he was interested in coming and checking how everything had gone there. Now, he knew that this woman was able to dispel nightmares, so that he thought about how she could be useful. But at that moment, his assistant suddenly ran up to him. He said that guests had come to see him and asked if he could let them in. Isaac was very surprised that someone wanted to see him from the very morning, but after the assistant said who it was, he still agreed to this meeting. The man went into the guest room where Patricia and Melanie were already waiting for him. The woman came forward and said that she thought that her Emily was with him. The man pretended not to understand anything. Then Patricia explained that her daughter had seen her sister in the city. He gave her his hand and they left together. At that very moment, Emily was already leaving the twins' room. She told Stella that if she wanted to hold hands at night, she could just tell her. She would be happy to help. The girl, of course, refused again and called her a witch. Then Emily went to her room and suddenly noticed that they had guests. Taking a closer look, she realized that it was her stepmother and sister. She immediately hid behind their back and could not believe that they had actually come to this place. I couldn't understand at all how they found her. At that moment, Meloni, who had very good hearing, showed her mother upstairs and said that there was someone there. Everyone immediately looked up and saw that it was none other than Emily, who was hiding behind the wall. The girl had no choice after this. She also had to be present at this meeting. Therefore, they gave her a little time to change into normal clothes, and they all gathered together. The mother told her adopted daughter in a fake voice that she was glad she was okay. Melanie also pretended that they were worried and said that they were very scared when she didn't come home. They continued to talk about how worried they were, but Emil knew the truth. They never loved her. They didn't feed her. They didn't let her live in peace. So all these words about worry and care were a lie. In the end, Patricia suddenly took the girl by the hand and said that she should have apologized, and then they would forgive her. After that, she said that it was time for them to go home, because Philip would definitely not wait long. Emily ended up just following them. Then suddenly, on the way out, she heard Isaac's voice asking if this was what the girl wanted. The girl immediately asked him what he was saying. However, Patricia answered for her and said, with a smile on her face, that of course she wanted to go home. The man got angry when he heard her answer. He immediately yelled and said that he hadn't asked her. After that, he approached Emily and said that he would like to know how she felt. At that moment, Emily remembered all the terrible things that Philip did to her. Her Rocky began to tremble. At some points, she felt a strong panic. But eventually, the girl collected her thoughts. She removed her hand from her stepmother and realized that she had returned to the past, only to change her destiny and not repeat her mistakes. So the girl looked the Duke straight in the face and said, in a confident voice, that she would like to stay with him. Her relatives were very surprised when they heard this, because she had never shown any initiative before and had never said what she really wanted. Patricia suddenly started yelling at her. She said that the girl was being selfish and asked, since when did she become so rude? Well, Isaac suddenly sighed heavily and said, who would talk about bad manners? They declared it early in the morning, and Emily never insulted me, unlike her family. He said that, on the contrary, her excessive zeal sometimes only got in the way. Emily always cared about those around her, so the words that the woman said were completely untrue. Patricia immediately became indignant. She said that she could not allow the young lady to live in someone else's house without permission. This was completely wrong. But Isaac believed that they didn't love her that much. He silently watched them and came to the conclusion that they were only worried about their own well-being than about what would be best for Emily. She, of course, was immediately indignant. She asked how a man dared to say something like that. But Isaac replied that even an idiot would understand that she simply wanted to sell her stepdaughter to the prince. Moreover, he grabbed Emily by the shoulder and pulled her towards him, saying that she would stay with them because now the girl was his fiancée. Only when we heard this, we were very shocked. They did not understand how this was even possible, and whether he was lying. The stepmother immediately said that she should marry Prince Philip. However, Isaac calmly explained to her that she could not force Emily because the girl was already at the age when she had the right to decide for herself. Emily suddenly stopped him because he was talking too much. The girl then turned to her stepmother herself and said that she was grateful to her family, but she would marry Isaac directly. Patricia replied that now everything was clear to her, exactly like that. The girl decided to respond to the kindness. She decided to just take them and betray them. At that moment, her sister herself did not understand why the man chose her to get engaged to. It was all unfair, because she fell in love with him at first sight. After a short conversation, they finally turned around and started to leave, and Mela didn't think about the fact that Emily would still pay for taking her fiancé away from her, and the girl herself would definitely marry the Duke. As they left, Emily thanked the man for his help, but Isaac said she shouldn't do that. The man explained that they would need her abilities because she knew how to drive away nightmare from children, so it was beneficial for both of them. The girl noticed the fact that the man had a rather peculiar manner of speech, and she even liked it, especially when he complimented her. But in fact, at that moment, Stella was behind the door, and when she heard that her uncle was engaged to this witch, she was very disappointed. At that moment, an assistant came out to meet her, saw the girl, was immediately surprised, and asked what she was doing in this place. But she did not answer, and simply left. After that, Theo entered the office. The girl immediately greeted him, but from the window he was so glad to see him. He asked if something else had happened. The assistant immediately reassured him that he had come with good news, then handed him a small envelope and said that the puppy's owner had written them a letter. It was written in gratitude for the fact that they found her dog. Her friend saw the ad and contacted the girl. Her name was Veronica, and she lived on the outskirts of the city. She would really like to take the puppy, but she has sore legs, so she couldn't come. So the women wrote that if they happened to be passing by, they could visit her. Soon, this really happened, because the dog had to be given away. They came to an elderly woman, Veronica, who at that moment was lying on the bed reading her book. When she saw her puppy, she was immediately happy. This dog's name was Snowball. He jumped onto his owner's bed and immediately began to lick her hands. Emily went with Theo. He introduced himself and said where they were from. Veronica, meanwhile, thanked them for finding her dog. She simply did not close the door, and because of this, he ran away, and of course, she could not catch up with him. Emily then called Louis closer so that he could get to know the woman. Veronica got out of bed and greeted him, thanking him for the time he spent looking at her Snowball. The boy, meanwhile, said goodbye to his dog. At that moment, tears welled up in his eyes. Of course, he didn't want to part with him. Veronica saw his upset expression and asked if the boy would like to keep this dog. She was definitely in a very bad condition, and she was afraid that he might run away again, and she definitely didn't want that. Veronica suggested that they could play together very well and complement each other. She stroked Louis's head and said that it was a great joy for her to see that Snowball was okay and that he had found himself a company. Then Lois suggested that he would bring the dog to its owner so that she would not be so lonely. Emily understood that the Duke would not allow her to leave the dog so easily, so she took it upon herself to talk to him. She had already begun to get to know Duke Isaac a little better, so she considered him a very kind person. So she really believed that he would be able to do something nice for the children. In the evening, when they returned and she asked him about it, he categorically refused. Emily began to beg him to say that she would carefully watch him and always control everything, but the man again refused her. He forbade her to have a dog in the house. No matter how much the girl begged him, and no matter how many arguments she gave, the man still said that he was against it and asked to return the dog back to its owner. Emily said that Louis was still very little, so it was impossible to take away his close friend. She asked who he would then pour out his feelings to. The man understood perfectly well what she was talking about, but she still insisted on her own, so he simply went out and closed the door behind him so as not to continue this conversation. Emily, of course, was very upset after this. However, she was not going to give up so easily. For several more days in a row, she approached Isaac and asked him to leave this puppy at home. In the end, Louis himself began to doubt that she would succeed. The girl finally gave up. She came to the boy and asked him for forgiveness for the fact that she had failed. She was still going to come up with something because she didn't want Louis to deprive the boy of this pleasure, and she herself understood that it could be very serious, and she could even be punished. They talked about all this for some time, and Louis began to consider himself a crybaby. The girl, of course, objected to this. At that moment, the Duke approached them. He asked if it was true that they had talked about the dog, and he also added that he had ordered Theo to return the puppy to the owner tomorrow, and that this had not been discussed. Of course, the boy became even more upset and began to slowly say goodbye to his beautiful puppy because he understood that he would never see him again. Emily couldn't look at the boy's pain, so she followed the Duke and asked if he didn't want to leave the puppy just because he was protecting Louis from the pain of loss that he might receive. At that moment, the man remembered how Louis cried and screamed when he lost his parents. It was incredibly painful for him to watch, despite the fact that he didn't even show it. In order not to show how much pain he was in, the man only said in a rough voice that she knew nothing about him, not about him, Louisa. Emily ignored his words. She said, "I understand it is very painful to lose loved ones. My heart breaks into pieces. But what is even more painful is to give up what you value." She explained that he experiences the most genuine happiness with this puppy. They play and fall asleep together, and if he allows Snowball to stay, then over time, even after the loss, he will still have warm and important memories. Louis then intervened in the conversation himself. He said that he would really like to be with Snowball. He acknowledged the fact that he was a crybaby. However, if they were together, he would be the happiest boy in the world. Isaac didn't even turn to him. He said that sooner or later the time would come and he would have to part with him, and asked if the boy was ready. Louis said that he understood all this perfectly well and believed that one could never be prepared for this, but he still wanted to be close to his Snowball. So Isaac finally took pity on them and allowed Snowball to live with them. Of course, they were very happy to hear this. He hugged his new friend, who will now definitely stay with them, and told him how much he loves him. Isaac turned his head and saw this picture, and a soft smile appeared on his face. He was happy that at least this way he could make him happy. However, Stella was not as happy as her brother that evening. She lay in her dark room and thought about what the witch said about marrying their uncle. She believed that if they got married, they would become a big obstacle. At some point, the girl even thought that they would simply be abandoned and they would be left alone again. In fact, after their father's death, Stella's mother always promised to be there for them. However, soon after that, she also left this cruel world. The girl, of course, was very angry with her. She didn't know what to do now. In the end, she gave in and burst into tears. At that moment, she was really in a hopeless situation for herself. But that evening, Isaac approached them, introduced himself, and said that he was their father's younger brother and was now the children's new guardian. He didn't look like a cheerful father, but that evening the man picked up the children and carried them himself. And then Stella realized that he wouldn't be such a bad guardian as she might have thought. He reminded her a little of their father, and because of this, she was glad, because a part of him would always be with them. But now that Stella found out that he wanted to get married, she thought that he would simply forget about them, and there would be no more room for them in his heart. She needed to come up with something to fix this situation, so the girl was incredibly serious. One night, Lewis told Emily about a dream he had about a skeleton with a scythe, chasing a boy and wanting to kill him. In complete darkness, the boy simply cannot escape from him. Then his mom and dad die. Lewis burst into tears again. He believed that it was because of him that mom and dad died. He really blamed himself for some reason. Of course, Emily assured him that he was not guilty of anything. However, the boy believed that he too would be killed one day, just like in his dream. She hugged him and said that she would never allow this to happen. Then, Louis couldn't hold back and burst into tears. In fact, he had kept silent about it for so long, but it was nice for him to tell at least someone. The girl at that moment was, of course, confused. She didn't know what to do, why she hid this estate at all, and whether she had had the same nightmare. At that moment, they were in the gazebo, and Stella, who came out to talk to her brother, saw the two of them. She didn't understand what the boy was doing at all, and why he was with this witch. She wanted to get rid of them, but for some reason, he began to become attached to her. Stella was incredibly angry at her brother. She considered him a traitor since he had disobeyed her and started to behave well towards this woman. When the next day came, Stella sat to the side the whole time and thought very hard about something. She didn't even play with Lewis because she was really offended by him. The boy, of course, immediately noticed this and eventually approached the girl and said that she had been acting strangely since the morning. He wanted to know what had happened to her, but she called him a traitor and asked why he was hugging that witch the previous day. The girl said that this woman would definitely kick them out sooner or later, but Louis began to defend Emily and replied that she was definitely not like that. She helped them leave Snowball, so she was kind. But the girl screamed and said that she would marry Uncle Louis, of course, and he took this as a very happy emotion. He thought that Emily would now be like a new mother to them. He liked it. But Stella screamed and said that they only had one mother, and no one could replace her. He had to remember this forever. After that, she explained that if they got married, they, like children, would interfere with them. Louis, of course, didn't understand anything, but Stella, leaving, said that if he communicated with this Emily again, she would simply strangle him. The boy himself was shocked by the news that they could interfere with her. At first, he was very upset, but then he thought that his sister had simply misunderstood everything. He thought he had to do something. Then, opening the cabinet, he saw Stella's treasure. He tried to take it in his hands, but he couldn't reach it and ended up dropping it on the ground. Then the box opened, and a lot of letters flew out of it. The boy immediately became very upset and didn't think that he would be able to drop everything. Snowball immediately thought that someone was playing with him. He grabbed one of the mittens that was in this box and began to gnaw on it. The boy, seeing this, immediately scolded him, but he was able to do this too late, so he came to Emily in the hope that she could help him. He showed her the torn mittens and said that he had made a huge mistake and now had to correct it. Lewis explained that his mother had knitted these mittens with tally. He wanted to show them to Emily. However, he ended up dropping them and the snowball chewed them up. The woman was very surprised to hear that he wanted to show her this, and when she asked why, he said that if she married her uncle, he would probably drive them away, and therefore he wanted to convince her to leave them. The girl, hearing this nonsense, immediately became indignant. She said that of course this would not happen, and Louis, wiping away tears, asked, did this really mean that she would become their new mother? Emilia was a little embarrassed then, but smiling, she said that if the children didn't mind, she thought it would be great. Louis, of course, wasn't against it. After that, he said that she could also knit mittens for Stella, and then they could finally become friends. But he had broken the previous mittens, so something had to be done with them, too. Emily immediately replied that she understood that they were expensive, so he didn't have to worry. She would definitely fix them. The boy immediately became happy. He thanked Emily, but then suddenly his sister's voice was heard behind them, asking if he had already forgotten what she had told him. Louis was worried. She understood that Stella had already noticed them. Then he realized that he was still holding her mittens in his hands. However, she had not yet seen them. The boy immediately lowered his head and began to ask her for forgiveness. He burst into tears and said that she had ruined everything, and he was very sorry. But the sister noticed these mittens and how they were ruined. She said that everything was fine and asked him to simply put them back in place and not touch them anymore. Of course, the girls were very upset, but for some reason, she didn't show it. At that moment, Theo appeared from around the corner. Seeing the crowd, he immediately asked what had happened to them. Emily was glad that he came. She asked him to lend her a sewing kit because she wanted to fix these mittens. When the assistant looked at this thing, he immediately realized that these mittens belonged to him. He panicked and asked what happened. When Emily told him the whole situation, the man even offered to help her, so together they began to sew the mittens back. Theo actually loved to knit and was glad to help her to return Stella her expensive thing. In fact, the girl had never left her mother's side before. It was Louis who never ran after her like she did. In the end, the women spoiled their daughter quite a bit, and as soon as Emily heard about it, she was shocked. She definitely didn't expect to hear such a story. It was really true that I always loved my mother very much, and as soon as I spent time with her, I did not even allow Louis and Blisco to come close to them. When Emily heard this story, she was shocked, because she thought that Stella had always been a serious, caring sister who thought about her brother's well-being. But Theo replied that he thought everything had changed after their mother killed herself after her husband's death. She had behaved well and even returned to normal, but everything had changed abruptly. Mrs. Stella does not understand why their mother died. She blamed herself and everyone around her, and because of this, she was so protective of Louis. As soon as Emily realized this, she was shocked and did not expect that the girl could suffer so much and feel all these terrible negative emotions and also experience them alone. The woman felt very sorry, so she decided to intervene in this situation and help Stella a little. That evening, when Isaac returned from his mission, he turned to his assistant and asked what the man thought about Emily in general. The guy answered him what he thought. He believed that the girl was a sincere person and worried about the children. However, Stella turned out to be an impregnable fortress and was unable to become friends with her like that. Isaac was starting to get a little worried because almost a month had passed, and he was wondering how it would all end. A few days later, Louis came to his sister. He handed her the mittens and asked for forgiveness for what he had done. The boy explained that Emily had fixed them and handed the girl her things. Emily also explained that Louis actively helped her, and she slightly increased the size of these mittens because they showed her that they were too small. Stella took her thing. At that moment, tears welled up in her eyes. She just stood and stared at one point without even blinking. Louis also burst into tears because he couldn't bear to see his sister in pain. With a trembling voice, he asked her why she was so upset. The girl only asked in a cold voice why they had to be fixed. Moose tried to explain, but she yelled at him and told him to leave immediately. After that, she ran into her room and closed the door behind her. Louis did not understand what was happening. He felt guilty before her. He burst into tears and said that it was because of him that Stella was now upset and crying. He was again to blame for everything. Emily tried to calm him down and said that it was not his fault. Sighing heavily, she replied that it was precisely her fault. At that very moment, Isaac was standing not far from them. Having heard about this conversation, he thought seriously about it, but did not bother anyone for a while. When Stella ran into her room, she lay down on the bed and cried loudly. She hugged her mittens and turned to her mother. The girl actively tried to forget her, but she couldn't. Her little hands were clutching the mittens that her dear mother had made, and she said that she missed her very much, and that she missed her. Stella cried loudly. She couldn't believe that her mother had really abandoned them, and now she had to live through all this alone. Then Isaac suddenly knocked on her door, opened the door, and asked if they could talk a little. The girl, of course, refused him. She said that her eyes hurt a lot, and therefore she did not want to see or talk to anyone. The Duke approached her and held out a handkerchief. He told her to take it, but the girl warned him that she was not crying at all. She just had something in her eye. The man, of course, knew the truth. However, he began to put pressure on her. After she calmed down a little, Stella asked what he wanted to talk to her about. Isaac didn't even look at her. He understood that it would be harder that way, so he turned away and asked her to tell him what she thought about Emily. Stella suddenly interrupted him and asked if her uncle was really going to marry her. The man was genuinely surprised, since he hadn't told anyone about it, and asked how she even found out about it. The girl did not look for this information. She said that she heard about it when he was talking to her family. Then, in an even quieter voice, she asked, "Is it possible that if they get married, he will drive her and her brother away?" Isaac immediately asked why she decided that way, but the girl replied that she understood it perfectly well, because they were not his children. For a while, the man was simply silent. However, stroking her head, he calmed her down and said that he was very sorry for making them worry, but now everything would definitely be fine. After Emily took Louis into another room to calm him down, she went out onto the balcony to think for a bit. The woman sighed heavily and said that tomorrow would be exactly a month since she had ended up in this place and still hated it. She understood that if nothing changed, then all her efforts would be in vain, and she generally regretted coming to this place because she could not achieve what she wanted. Louis, who heard these phrases, immediately became upset. He could not believe that if he did not make peace with Stella, then Mrs. Emily would leave. Of course, he was very worried about his sister and had to always be on her side. However, he really did not want Emily to leave. So the boy plucked up his courage and approached her and said that he had one plan, so he wanted her to listen to him carefully. They agreed on everything, and the next morning, the first thing Louisa did was go to his little sister and ask if she would like to play hide and seek. He said that Emily would lead and not hide. The girl immediately hid behind the blanket and said that if the witch played, she would refuse. Emily whispered to the boy and suggested that he not play since that was the case, but he convinced her that it would be better this way and that they could finally become friends. The woman decided to try again. She came closer to Stella and said that, in fact, she was the best driver. The girl immediately protested. She said that she was the best hide-and-seek player, and no one could beat her. The woman then laughed, but after she calmed down, she suggested that Stella decide which of them was really the better player. The girl agreed. After that, they started playing. Some time passed, and it even started getting dark outside. They played for so long. When they went outside, Emily noticed the large number of butterflies that were in their garden. But Stella didn't show much surprise or admiration. She said that they always flew here at such times. The woman continued her attempts to establish contact with her. She said that the girl did not know much, so she probably loved her. After which, she added that she was even a little envious of these creatures. After all, they fly wherever they want. The girl thoughtfully said that no one in her family ever loved her. She was always in pain and lonely. This is the very reason why Emily envies the butterfly. They can easily fly away when they don't like something, but she never had such an opportunity. The girls didn't say anything else. Then Stella suddenly caught a butterfly that began to fall lower and lower from above. She looked at it carefully and noticed that it had a broken wing and asked if it would never fly away again. Emily knew that she had magical abilities, so she told the girl to watch carefully. Activating them, she began to heal the butterfly's wing, and after some time she saw how the broken wing of the butterfly that she was holding in her hand was completely healed. Soon after, the butterfly flew back up. The two girls were happy to see this, and immediately felt good in her soul, because she really loved these creatures. For a while, they just watched the butterfly move away into the distance. And then Stella suddenly said that she, too, would like to become a butterfly. The girl also wanted to be as free as they were. After that, she smiled at Emily and thanked her for helping her. The woman, on the contrary, thanked her for playing with her. For her, it was really important and pleasant. Stella, a little embarrassed, said that she simply loved hide and seek, after which the woman suggested that she return back to the estate because the Duke would definitely start to worry. When she saw the girl's upset face, she said with a smile that she didn't have to worry. This was her home, and she was safe in this place, so she definitely didn't need to fly away like this butterfly. As soon as she heard this, she was immediately very surprised, not understanding what she was talking about, but their conversation was interrupted by the Duke, who came out of the estate. He suddenly took Stella in his arms and told Mrs. Emily that she must leave their house immediately. At that moment, Louis suddenly ran up to him. He grabbed the Duke by the shirt and told him not to drive them away. Emily, he wanted the woman to stay with them. But the girl reacted to this calmly. She said that she understood everything, so she would do it because they had an agreement, after all. When Isaac saw her calm expression, he was very surprised and asked why she didn't even worry about it. But Emily explained that she herself was going to raise this issue because she understood perfectly well that she had failed. The Duke was quite a polite man, so he asked her for forgiveness. However, she explained that he did not need to apologize. After all, they had an agreement. So she thanked him for giving her at least this wonderful month. Then the woman turned around and started walking towards the estate to collect her things and leave. Stella saw this and was very disappointed. At that moment, she panicked and thought that it was her fault, that she had driven her away and perhaps ruined someone else's life again. Theo helped her pack her things, he escorted her to the exit, and asked what she would do next. Emily, surprisingly, was actually very cheerful. She said that the first thing she was going to do was find a place to stay for the night. Then, to her surprise, the man suddenly handed her a small bag of money. He said that the gentleman had given it to her for her first expenses. Of course, the girl was indignant. She said that she couldn't take this money, but he asked her to do it anyway, otherwise he would be scolded. The girl accepted them and thanked him again. At that moment, Louis came out of the room. He looked at Emily with a pitiful look and asked if she really was leaving. He ran closer to her and asked her not to do this because he really wanted to live with her. She brought him so much happiness. The woman calmed the boy down and said that she understood everything perfectly, then hugged him and promised that she would visit him, and also advised him not to argue with his sister or his dog, and also to be sure to listen to his uncle. He started hugging Emily and shouted for her to stay and not leave him. Theo pulled Mr. Lewis away and told him not to push so hard. He suggested that they should escort the lady properly so that she would not be upset either. In the end, Emily bowed her head in farewell, and the boy continued to cry and struggle. Stella stood behind her in the meantime. She also went out to see her off, and at that moment she thought about the fact that perhaps the girl really didn't want to leave them. Otherwise, she definitely wouldn't have said those pleasant words that she heard from her at the end. At that moment, Lewis curled up on the floor and asked his sister if she wasn't even a little sad. The girl said that of course she wasn't sad at all. Although this wasn't true, the boy immediately protested and said that he knew perfectly well what she was thinking. After all, they were twins. Stella didn't answer this. The twins remained in the room, and the Duke's assistant went to the gentleman and asked if it was really worth driving Lady Emily away. The man said that this was indeed the case, but Theo noticed that the gentleman himself was upset when he did this, so he did not understand his logic at all. Isaac did not want to talk about it, and simply changed the subject at that very moment. In the royal palace, Prince Philip was surrounded by his two mistresses. Suddenly, the butler came to the man. He bowed and said that the Marquise Clos wanted to meet him and asked what he needed to tell her. When the guy heard who exactly it was, he was very surprised. The butler confirmed and said that it was his mother, his fiancée, Emily. The man drove away his mistresses and then remembered that they had agreed to meet with her, so he allowed them to let her in. When Patricia came to the man, she greeted him properly and immediately said that she had one request for him. The man immediately became wary and asked what had happened, and the girl explained that it concerned her daughter Emily. She said that Emily announced that she was marrying Duke Isaac. As soon as the prince heard about it, he immediately became wary. He did not understand why this could happen at all. The man immediately told the woman to tell him in all the details, and that's how their evening went. As the sun began to set beyond the horizon, Emily finally found a place to live. It was a great place to shelter from the rain and wind, and even the bed turned out to be quite soft. She believed that this place was more than enough for her, because she still needed to save money, because in the future she would definitely need a considerable amount of money. Life on the estate was a paradise for her. Everyone was incredibly kind to her. And yet she still continued to worry about the children. Now that she was not around, their nightmares could get worse. In fact, she realized for herself that she really wanted to live with them. She had already gotten used to these wonderful children during this month, and because of this, she was sad that she had to leave the estate. But Emily quickly stopped herself from thinking about these things. She understood that she couldn't despair. It was time for her to think about her future, since she had already found herself in such a situation. At that moment, someone suddenly knocked on the girl's door. She was a little surprised because she wasn't expecting any guests, but she immediately went up to him and opened the front door to let the person in. The man actually turned out to be Isaac, along with his assistant and Stella. When the girl opened the door and saw them, she was very surprised. The Duke immediately asked for forgiveness for coming without warning and asked if he could come inside. In fact, it was not by chance that he appeared on her doorstep. A few hours before, Stella came to her uncle because she was simply consumed by guilt. When Isaac saw his niece, he immediately left his business and asked if she wanted anything. The girl immediately asked a very important question. She asked, "If you marry her, then Lucas and I will be kicked out of the estate." At first, the man did not understand who she was talking about, but then he realized that she meant Emile, and with a smile on his face, he answered the girl that he would never leave them under any circumstances. He explained that now it was their home, so he simply had no right to kick them out. Of course, Stella was shocked to hear this, because she really thought that he could leave them. So now, she, barely holding back tears, said that she would really like this woman to return. Isaac looked at the girl in surprise and asked if she was sure of this, because she was one of those who categorically refused for the woman to stay. But the girl said that while she was in this place, this Louis was fast asleep, and she is sure that this girl will not drive us away. Now she is convinced of it. Stella thoughtfully replied that she also loved butterflies, so they could probably find a common language. The Duke, after listening to her, finally agreed. He extended his hand and offered to return Emily home together. Thus, everything turned out so that they arrived late in the evening to the girl. The Duke told her everything so that she would understand how this happened. Isaac apologized for the long story, after which he bowed before her and said that he really wanted her to return back to the estate. They all wanted it. Emily looked at Stella in surprise. because she knew that the girl was clearly not delighted with her, since she even called her a witch. The girl protested and said that she had never forbidden her to stay. After that, Emily, in order to be completely sure, asked if they would be okay with her living with them. The man smiled and said that everything was exactly like that, after which she stretched out her hands and told them to go back already, because Louis missed them. The girl then could not hold back her tears. She ran up to Estelle and hugged her tightly, thanking her. She said that she was incredibly happy that they would now all live together. When they arrived back at the palace, Louis saw Emily and couldn't contain his emotions. He ran up to her, hugged her, and burst into tears. And the girl said that she would now be with them. Now the girl felt much calmer. Even though she had lived in this place for only a month, it had still managed to become her real home, so she definitely didn't want to leave anywhere from there. Stella, meanwhile, returned to her room, and after that she brought her a small bundle of paper. She gave it to Emily and said that it was for her. She said that she drew this butterfly herself. Emily was amazed. She did not expect that something like this would be done for her. It was very cute. But the girl explained that she herself said that she loved butterflies, so she decided to give her a small gift. Emily was delighted and said that she would definitely keep this drawing, and Stella suggested that she draw something else. The girl said that I would be happy to receive some kind of drawing from her, and after that, Stella, turning away and holding back her displeasure, told her to treat her the same way as Louis. Emily couldn't help but look surprised as she asked if she really wouldn't mind. The girl said that everything was exactly like that. However, she warned the girl not to even think that they could be close friends. After the girl put her things back, she met with Isaac. The man said that since she was with him again, they would definitely get married. Emily didn't object, and the man also said that this also meant that they would definitely have to have a wedding ceremony. When she heard this, her face turned red. The girl did not expect that he would want to hold the wedding so quickly. The man explained that since she was engaged to the prince, they did not know what her family would do. So they had to announce their wedding to the world as soon as possible. He suggested holding their ceremony the day after tomorrow. Emily agreed because she understood how big the risks were. And so, when a few days had passed since that moment, they had actually managed to organize everything. Emily walked arm in arm with Isaac in a beautiful, long white wedding dress. The Duke's organizational skills were beyond praise. They spent the longest time choosing her wedding dress because the children argued about which one would suit her best. When the girl walked to the altar, she heard all these strange conversations of the guests present. They believed that the bride was being threatened because they did not understand how she could otherwise agree to marry the executioner. Emily didn't understand them. Why did they say something like that? After all, it was she who proposed this marriage, but Isaac advised her to just ignore it because people will always say something. After that, looking straight into her eyes, he said that he would definitely protect her, so she could not worry about anything at all. The children brought out rings that they had to put on each other. When Louis saw the lady, he was delighted. He said that she had chosen a simply incredible dress and looked amazing. The girl thanked her, and after that, she took the ring. Despite the fact that it was not a marriage for love, but in her life appeared these beautiful twins, whom she truly loved. But then suddenly, when they were putting rings on each other, a man suddenly entered the hall and in a rough voice asked the Isaac if he was really going to marry her, knowing that she was his bride. Everyone immediately turned around to see who it was, and as soon as they saw Prince Philip, everything immediately fell into place. Emily was shocked. Her whole body began to shake with fear. She understood that this meeting would not turn out well. But the Duke turned to His Highness and asked if he really wanted something. After all, they were having a wedding ceremony here, and he was a bit of a hindrance. Then Philip shouted and replied that she was his bride, so he had to take her back. Amelia tried to calm down. She knew that now everything was different. She could not be afraid of him. However, she was involuntarily shaking. The girl could not do anything with her emotions. Isaac put his hand on her shoulder and reassured her. He said that she couldn't help but worry that he was there. He put his arm around her shoulder and told Philip that they had loved each other long before her engagement. Besides, he would not give her into the hands of someone who did not even remember her name. Philip, of course, was outraged. He began to call the Duke names and said that he would order him to be executed for this. Emily was a little wary because this man always didn't care about human lives. At this rate, everything would end badly. So, despite her inexplicable fear, she decided to intervene. The girl stood between them and said that the marriage is concluded by agreement of both parties, but she does not remember agreeing to marry the prince. The indignant girl said that she had not heard from him for a whole month, and she believed that their engagement could therefore be considered annulled. Philip then suddenly raised his hand to her, but did not hit her. He asked, in a rough voice, how she dared to go against him. Did she really want to die. The man also said that he very much doubted that they loved each other. Her mother said that they had never even met. And in general, Philip did not understand who could look at this damned idiot like the Duke. Emily then said in a firm voice that she really loved Isaac, and the man became even more angry upon hearing this. Of course, they didn't like each other, but Emily admired the Duke, so she wasn't going to let anyone insult him. Of course, Philip did not believe her then. The girl decided to prove her love. She approached the man and kissed him deep inside, proving her true feelings. As soon as everyone saw this, they were amazed. Philip, of course, got angry, and the children even felt a little awkward, because adults had never done this in front of them. After they finished kissing, Emily asked if the kiss between the bride and groom was enough proof of their feelings. She approached the priest and asked him to finally declare them husband and wife. The man did so immediately. Isaac, who after the kiss was embarrassed and could not even look at the girl. After they were officially announced, he looked at Philip and said that everything was already over, so he asked the man to leave their party. Philip came closer to him. He grabbed him by the collar and said that the guy would pay for this, after which he sharply pushed him aside and left. After everything was over, Stella turned to everyone and suggested continuing the wedding ceremony. After all, they had a celebration that day, so they shouldn't be distracted by strangers. The adults listened to them after all, and continued to celebrate. Emily then knew that everything would definitely be fine, because she had a wonderful ally on her side, so she could no longer be afraid of anything. Despite the unexpected guest, the wedding went really well, and as soon as the ceremony was over, Emily changed into her nightgown and sat down on the bed and breathed a sigh of relief. It had been a very busy day indeed, but she was now officially the Duke's wife. After all this happened, the girl often remembered that kiss that happened with Isaac. She couldn't believe that this had actually happened to her. It all seemed distant and strange. Of course, she was very embarrassed because she did not understand how she could allow herself to do something like that. She was now ashamed to even look at a man after that. But then Emily thought about the fact that since they were now officially married, perhaps they should have had their first wedding night with all the intimate details. As soon as she thought about it, her whole face turned red. But then, suddenly someone knocked on the door. She immediately allowed him to enter and saw that it was Isaac. Seeing him, she was very surprised, and the girl immediately got out of bed. But the man said that she shouldn't do this. He wanted to talk to her about something. Emily sat down next to him and asked what exactly he wanted to discuss. The man felt very awkward. It was obvious that it was difficult for him to start this topic of conversation. At that moment, the girl Dasha thought that he wanted to talk to her about their first wedding night. At some point, she thought that she had dreamed all of this, or that she was delirious. Emily noticed that, for some reason, she was the only one who felt awkward. She didn't understand what the man wanted to talk about, and when he finally started, he said that the topic concerned his work. She looked at him in surprise, but Isaac calmly replied that their family had been doing the same thing for many generations. They were assassins in the service of the crown. By order of the king, they kill criminals and enemies of the crown. When Emily heard all this, she sighed heavily and said that they were murderers after all. Now everything became clear to her. She finally understood why he was injured in their first meeting, at which point the man moved away from her so that she would feel safe and asked if she was afraid now, knowing this information. He said that of course you don't talk about such things on your wedding night. However, they had made a deal, and so he had to tell her everything. Isaac also warned the girl that she could calmly leave if she wanted, but Emily suddenly grabbed his hand and said that she liked this place. She replied that this was the first time she felt happy, so she was going to stay. The Duke was, of course, very surprised to hear this. However, then he smiled and said that she was rather strange, but in a good sense of the word. After that, Emily said that she also wanted to ask him something. This topic concerned twins. The girl said that every night they were tormented by nightmares and asked if his family had another secret that could affect this aspect. The man began to move away from her and immediately became incredibly serious. He asked why she even decided that this was so. She said that the moose told her about his nightmare, that death was chasing him there. He saw the bodies of his parents, and in the end, he was killed too. Emily said that when she heard this, everything in her chest sank. The man said that nightmares in their family are a common thing. That's why it seemed to her that there was definitely something wrong, and he wasn't telling her everything. So she wanted him to finally tell her at least something. Isaac then sighed heavily and said that he didn't even know where to start, and in the end, he sat back down on the couch and said that the best thing to tell was probably about the nightmare. He said that this nightmare was dreamed by all members of the family, including him, of course, so Emily's ability to heal nightmares was a real miracle for them. He asked how long she had had these powers. Emily said that she realized that she had this power when she first cured a mouse while sitting in the attic. Then I thought that there was nothing special about it, and that's why I didn't tell anyone anything before, because I understood that they could bully her even more. Isaac said that now everything is clear to him, and also said that it was the right decision, in fact. The girl was surprised by his condemnation. However, she did not ask more questions. She turned to the man and said that if he needed help and she could do it, then of course he could calmly contact her. The Duke was flattered by this offer, but he said that she had already helped them out. The twins could now sleep peacefully, so he was very grateful for this. But Emily replied that she wanted to help not only the children, but him too, because he had a lot of injuries from his work, and she was worried. Isaac didn't react to this at all, because after all, such were the duties of the head of the family. After that, he said that in fact, deep down, he always wanted to put an end to the sad fate of their family. Now, it became clear to Emily that if Louis becomes the head of the family, he will also have to kill. He is a vulnerable child. Therefore, it will be incredibly difficult for him to fulfill this duty. Emily thought about it and asked, was it really impossible for a man to refuse these duties? But the man replied that this question was not so easy to resolve, given how much secrets were involved in this matter that concerned the royal family itself. When he saw Emily's sad expression, he immediately apologized for dumping all this on her. He stood up from his seat and said that she was probably very tired after that day, so he told her to rest. But the girl grabbed his hand again. She pulled too hard, and because of this, she couldn't stay on her feet. Emilia fell onto the bed, and the man ended up on top of her. Isaac was very embarrassed, so he stood up very quickly. He asked for forgiveness for what happened, and said that he could not keep his balance. She simply pulled him too suddenly and too hard. But Emily didn't pay attention to this. She screamed and said that he was not obliged to bear this burden of responsibility on himself. Much to the man's surprise, Emily, for some reason, burst into tears and said that she did not understand why he spoke as if it was complete nonsense. The man asked in surprise why she was crying, but Emily continued to insist. Raising her voice even more, she asked, "Do you think this will make the family easier? But it shouldn't be like that. It's wrong." Isaac smiled and said that now he understood that she thought so, wiping away tears. He said that even if it didn't concern her, for some reason she still cried and was angry about it. It was something unusual for him, but quite sweet when Emily finally calmed it down. She said that he should take better care of himself. But the girl also said with complete confidence that she did not want him to die at all. At that moment, she put her hands on his face so that he would look straight at her. Emily said that she just really wants him, Louis, and Stella to live the normal, happy life that they deserve. Isaac smiled when he heard this. He told Emile that no one had ever told him this before, so he was grateful for the care she showed. When the girl looked into his beautiful red eyes and couldn't look away, their hands suddenly intertwined, and the man already wanted to say something else, but didn't have time. And all because the door to their bedroom opened and the children came in. They screamed loudly, in particular Stella. She told them to stop and stop their intimacy. The girl replied that Louis said that he couldn't sleep because of them, so she came to have a serious talk with them about it.